right. Hello, everyone. I am Fumiko Hoeft, and I'll introduce myself in a little bit, but I'll start with the title. The title of my talk is Preventing the Reading Slide from COVID-19. So I'll talk a little bit about how it's looking like in the education system in the United States, a little bit about globally as well. And then I want to talk a little bit about the project that we're currently doing, and I will explain more in a little bit. The project name is called the Rescue Project, Reading Slide from COVID-19, Undoing the Effect. So what we're testing is whether a digital-based reading instruction can prevent the COVID slide. And we have our partners and funders listed here, but I'll go into more details as these slides progress. So who am I? I'm Fumiko Hoeft. I'm a psychiatrist and neuroscientist by training who studies learning, resilience, and reading acquisition, as well as dyslexia. I'm the director of this rescue project and co-director of the Haskins Global Literacy Hub with Ken Pugh, who's, as many of you know, who is the president of Haskins Labs and professor of UConn and Yale. I'm also a professor at UConn in psychological sciences, math, neuroscience, psychiatry, as well as UCSF. I direct the Brain Imaging Research Center at UConn. And I run a bicoastal lab called Brain Lens, Learning, Engineering, and Neural Systems Lab. And I've had training and held faculty positions at multiple institutions. Also relevant to this topic, I'm a member of the board of directors of the International Dyslexia Association, as well as the co-chair of the Scientific Advisory Board, and also a member of the Professional Advisory Board of the National Center for Learning Disabilities. So I want to talk about how I got into this and why we are motivated and interested in this topic right now. So we know that poor reading leads to negative life outcomes, whether they have environmental risk factors such as growing up in poverty or not speaking English as their first language growing up in the United States, where they may have biological risk factors that may put them at risk for developing dyslexia. Many cases, they lead to poor reading. Of course, there are exceptions as well. And they often have poor outcomes, whether it's poor educational attainment, poor psychosocial adjustments, poor health, or poor income. And this creates a downward spiral, and it is very important to stop this downward spiral. What we're focused on here, we're focused on a number of things, but related to this topic, we're interested in early identification of children at risk for reading problems, as well as providing preventative intervention. And it's not just important, but it's also possible. We know now that if you provide evidence-based early interventions in kindergarten, for example, it's 4 times more effective than general classroom practice. Also, waiting for 1 year reduces its effectiveness by 25 to 50%. And it goes from kindergarten to first grade to second grade, and it continues to diminish. Also, the return on investment is high. For every dollar spent, there's about $16 to $31 in return, whether it's local or the global economy. And also now, with the latest tools and research, we can predict risk with 60 to 80% accuracy. And of course, it depends on when you identify them and so on. And also, we know that the solution for dyslexia works for all. And the reason why we don't provide just intensive structured intervention is that because it's often costly and it doesn't scale well. But it's not going to hurt those who do not have dyslexia or who are not at risk either. In terms of the COVID-19, currently there's over 50 million students in the United States. Nearly all K-12 students are impacted by school closure. Among these, 7 million students are K-1 students. And this means that they receive no in-person class or instruction for about half a year because many of them close their schools in mid-March. So this is a map of the United States. I apologize, it's not global, even though it's a Haskins Global Literacy Hub. But I do have some towards the very end as well. But as you can see here, most of the states or all the states are closed to some degree right now. into May for the whole academic year or until further notice, or recommended closure is a minority of the states. Except for, I am in California right now, but I do feel like it's mandatory because there's a shelter in place among the whole state, so I'm not sure why it says it's recommended. We also know that this is, or at least the experts say that the experts estimate that the reading gains is expected to be 70% of a normal year if we go on this trajectory. So we know that there's a summer slump or summer slide during the summer months. There's about a month lost in learning due to the summer every year in the United States, from about 2 to 3 months of closure. But with this COVID, it will compound the effect, making the learning much less. So we'll look at some of the graphs. This is a report published by NWEA, and you may have seen this in various reports, but it's showing here that in reading, there's about 70% of the learning of a normal year that is likely to happen this year. In terms of math, it looks more disastrous, and some estimates that all the learning that happened this year may be lost in this year due to COVID, the COVID slide. So here's a graph showing that what many superintendents are expecting or their plans for makeup. And as you can see here, at least this is a little bit old, it's from April 7th, but you can see here that majority or almost half of the superintendents at this point did not have any plans for doing any makeup. But some recently have started to discuss school year starting in late July. For example, California is discussing them and some other states as well. So the goals of this project, the rescue project, is based on these background and the needs is to assess the severity of the COVID slide. Number 2, assess how much we can prevent using education technology. And number 3, whether we can identify factors that promote learning in this difficult situation or situation. And number 4, we wanted to be able to provide free and evidence-based reading games and provide progress reports to educators and parents because, as I'll talk about later, a lot of students as well as teachers are not getting the resources they need. In terms of the broader impact, we might learn from the findings that we find in this project how we might help prevent summer slide. We might also learn how we can support learning in remote and under-resourced areas where they might want to rely on education technology if they have the technology in place, which is another issue that we'll talk about later, and also improve distant learning and EdTech best practices. So what are we going to do here in this project? So here's a rescue project team. It constitutes a number of different universities, faculty from different universities. I am the lead investigator on this project. Kim Pugh is the co-PI on the project. As I introduced earlier, Devin Kearns is a faculty member, associate professor at University of Connecticut, and also Haskins member. He's an expert in education research. Nicole Landy is a reading comprehension expert at Haskins, Yale, and UConn. John Sabatini used to be at ETS. He's a research director there, and now he is a professor at University of Memphis. He's an expert in EdTech. Mike Milham, he's a scientist, senior scientist at the Child Mind Institute and the director of a center there, and he's an expert in big data and computational approaches. We also have different partners. It was on the first couple slides, but we have partners from other organizations. For example, we have funding from the National Science Foundation, generous support from the Tremaine Foundation, and also partnership from 2 assessment companies or organizations. One is University of Oregon, where Dibbles 8 is from, and the other one is Renaissance Learning, where STAR Learning, STAR Assessments is from. In terms of the eligibility, what kind of teachers and students are we recruiting? We're recruiting or giving priorities to United States K-1 public and charter school educators. We're giving priority also to schools that have DIBELS 8 or STAR data as the progress monitoring tool. We also need educators to help us obtain information from the school, such as the student progress monitoring data from previous times, as well as the future, and other information such as language backgrounds and so on. We need the students for this particular project. I know it's not very equitable, but we need them to have a Windows or Mac OS or Android tablets and internet, as well as a headset to work with. And this is because we have some research measures and other measures, and we want to keep it relatively consistent as possible. But in terms of the Grapho game, and we will have a parallel project on this launching soon that is completely based on philanthropy and not on foundation or federal funding, is a project called Rescue for All or Rescue for Families. And this one we will provide Grapho game, which is more of a commercial version of Grapho Learn, which is what we will be using. And this is more compatible with other devices such as smartphones, Android, Windows, Mac, and Chrome OS. But more information will be available on our website, and I'll show that at the very end. So in terms of the project, what we're doing is we're providing, or the K-1 students will receive a free 12-week digital reading instructional game called Grapho Learn. They'll complete assessments, STAR, as well as research-based assessments 4 to 5 times during and after completion of the program. So we will follow them up for a duration of 9 months. And school will be providing us school records so we can compare with historical data how the kids this year is doing, as well as how much we're preventing the COVID slide in this particular students who will go through this program. Also through a partnership with DIBELS 8 and STAR, the companies, or University of Oregon, as well as Renaissance Learning, will obtain historical and national data so we can compare with these groups. So Grapho Learn, what is Grapho Learn? It trains up to word level reading. It's used in Finland in every student for almost 10 years, or Grapho Learn, Grapho Game. And meta-analysis have shown that it shows that there's a significant effects of improvement in reading, especially when adults provide encouragement. And this is critical for it to be significant. It's comparable to small group instructions in at-risk children, and it was developed by Haskins Global Literacy Hub researchers at University of Jyväskylä, and there's a 25 years of history. There's a number of languages that has been developed for Grapho Learn. There's over 20 languages, or about 20 languages, Grapho Game. There's fewer, English, French, Pinyin, Chinese, and Dutch that's currently available. So what's the benefit for educators and parents? I'm going to try to see if I can show. I think the audio might not be available, but if you can see how it works a little bit. It's free, and students will receive progress monitoring reports, or the teachers and parents, and the students will receive researcher-based reading program that you're seeing here. We have some more demos on our website. So you get the idea of some activities. There's more that you can see online, so please take a look. In terms of the future, after we do this project, what are some other things that we want to do or can do? In terms of research, we could do more experimental research. We could do randomized control trials. We would love to do. This one is currently not a randomized control trials because of ethical concerns and also the very short time that we had to prepare for this project. And also there's a lot we can do for R&D. We can develop modules so that it goes up to reading comprehension or include oral language processing. And maybe we want to align that with curriculum because we believe that this kind of blended learning will have a greater impact. And also we could scale this to reach all children, which goes back to the Rescue for Families or Rescue for All parallel program that we're launching soon. But there are remaining issues. EdTech is not going to solve everything, at least immediately. There's a lot of issues that needs to be addressed. So here's the situation currently in the United States. There's a major problem in that teachers cannot reach students. So the majority is receiving some instructions. You can see here on the top left that 90% of the individuals are receiving some sort of instructions. But then many of them have only met once. So you can see never here, and you can see at least once, even though a lot of them are meeting weekly or even daily. So there's a significant number of individuals that are not meeting enough. And there are also many students who are truant. I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, but there's basically students that cannot be reached by the teachers. And you can see that there's about 20% of those students who cannot be reached currently, at least when this survey was done and reported on April 10th. And this seems to impact more high poverty districts, much more, as you can see in the beige compared to the dark blue, which is more of low poverty districts. Also, technology is a problem. There's lack of technology, especially in higher poverty schools, as you can imagine. If you see, as you can see on the top left, there's more challenges in student access to tech in high poverty schools or districts, as you can see in the lower bar, which is bigger, and it's about 64% of the districts are feeling that they're having problems with technology, providing technology to the students. They're also less likely to offer live instructions if you're in a higher poverty school. And you can see here that the percentage, I apologize, is about 14% of those that are receiving live instructions if you're in a high poverty school, whereas the lower poverty school is about a third. Also, if you're in a higher poverty school, you're more likely to use other technologies rather than live, such as texting, calling, in-person pickup of printed out materials, social media, and snail mail. So there's a significant difference in the way it's distributed. And as you can imagine, these are not the optimal way compared to in-classroom instructions. If you look generally in terms of technology access and how it's penetrates in the United States right now, is that 4% of the adults in the United States still do not have any kind of cell phones. 19% don't have a cell phone, and 26%, or a quarter of the individuals, do not have computers, and about half of the adults do not have tablets. So this also means that their children will not have access to, even if schools were able to offer live instructions, for example. And also, education technology is not going to reach poorest individuals because the poverty level, depending on the estimates, is thought to be around 10%, plus or minus. So this is some more global reports that just came out from The Economist, and they talk about the lack of remote learning in higher poverty countries. So the lack of remote learning is about 90%. So 9 in 10 countries are receiving remote learning of some sort in high income countries that you see on the right side of the graph. And then if you're from a low income country, you're only 20% of the countries are providing some sort of remote learning. So this is some global data. So we are still far from democratizing education, even though the efforts that we're making, as well as other people right now around the country and the globe, is one step forward to trying to democratize education. And that's it from me. Thank you very much. This is the email that you can send us questions or inquiries. You can visit our website to sign up, or if you are interested in getting more information, you can find information here. And we're in the press, in several press releases and media, so please check us out. Thank you very much. So I think I am supposed to take questions if there are any questions. Let's see. How do I sign up for this project? So one of the questions is, how do I sign up for this project? As you can see on the slide here, hopefully you can still see the slide. You can reach us by going to haskinsglobal.org/graphogame/rescue. And then another question is, how is COVID slide different from summer slide? So summer slide, of course, it's much shorter. Summer slide is going to be about half of the COVID slide. But in addition, there's a number of different differences. For example, there's a number of states are in shelter in place. So that also means that the libraries are closed, other resources where they can get social interactions and other play areas are closed. So they will not be receiving any kind of in-person stimulation that you could normally get during the summertime. Summertime, there's a lot of camps, and also those for financially underprivileged individuals. There is financial aid for some of these or many of these camps, whereas right now everything is pretty much shut down across the country as well as globally, so they were not able to access this. So they're pretty much relying on if they have technology at home or if they have caregivers or siblings who could provide extra support. And that's going to be, that's a major difference that further divides between those that have and don't have. The next question I have is the project available in other languages? So the NSF-funded project, the rescue project, the main rescue project is only available in American English and in the United States, unfortunately. The parallel project that we're planning on launching in the next week or two is in Grapho Game, but this is still in United States English. We're negotiating, we're in discussions right now to see if we can expand it to provide either English in other countries as well as some other languages as well, such as Spanish and Chinese and French. But this is currently in discussion. Please stay tuned by visiting our website, or if you submit an interest form and just write in a comment that you're interested in receiving that kind of information, we'll be happy to forward it to you once you submit a form. It's a very short questionnaire. Most of it won't be relevant to you, so you can ignore those. Another question that I have is, what typical skills and knowledge kids tend to forget first during a slide? I actually am not 100% sure or don't know how much of that has been studied in details. We do know that, as I showed earlier, there seems to be more math will be more impacted than reading, but within reading and the component process of reading, I'm not 100% sure. Except for if you think about what people think is that the COVID slide is going to be more impacting more of the younger students who don't have access or don't know how to use technology yet, as well as those who are at risk or have learning challenges or learning disabilities such as dyslexia because of the challenges of obtaining more visual information from online, for example, and so on. So we believe that in younger kids that they will be more severely impacted, and those that require explicit instructions will be more significantly impacted. Another question that I have here is, how does remote learning impact reading, learning, and teaching? Well, first of all, it's very hard to have technology that everyone has access to where you can do writing activities and see that. Also, fluency in these are hard to do. Anything that requires visual aspects are harder to do because you cannot see, or many people may not have video webcams available. And so those tasks or processes that impact those will be most impacted. The next question is, what kind of data are you collecting from participants? So in the NSF Rescue Project, what we will be collecting from is, we will be collecting play data from the Grapho Learn that they're playing every day, how long they're playing, how focused they are, and so on, and for how frequently. From the schools, we'll be collecting information such as home language, ethnicity, disability status, IEP 504, and school data that they collect, the progress monitoring. They do progress monitoring. In terms of the individual families, we ask information such as whether the families or the parents had problems learning to read, how their home environment is, for example, how many books they have at home, what kind of language they speak, let's see, how many vacations they take, how many cars, how many computers they have at home. These are some indicators that might impact educational outcome. So we collect this type of information as well. Weekly, we also ask a quick survey with several questions to the families, such as how much they were engaged or whether the children were distracted and so on. Let's see if I can scroll down. I think the last question that I have right now is, how is the GraphoLearn program different from programs such as Starfall? I apologize, I do not know Starfall, so I can't comment on Starfall. I think I can comment on, for example, Lexia, which is fairly common in the United States. Lexia is a fantastic program. I think there's a lot of evidence behind this. One advantage of Lexia is that it goes all the way up to upper grade so that they can learn about reading comprehension as well. We're limited to word reading, so we're really focused on early reading at this point. That said, the cost if you were to purchase currently Lexia versus, and I don't want to put it on a Pepsi versus Coca-Cola challenge here, but Lexia is currently more expensive if you go online and ask for pricing as an individual parent. If GraphoGame were sold in the United States, it would cost you, so for example, if you were to purchase a UK English version, you could purchase it. The US English version is not available yet, but you could purchase it for about $10. So there's a major difference there in terms of pricing. Also, GraphoGame is more standalone, GraphoLearn, and whereas Lexia, I think in many cases, especially when it's provided at schools, it's supposed to be blended learning where they have to have some teachers need to have some training to provide, whereas GraphoGame, it is very important that the parents as well as educators are engaged, but it doesn't require that much training. Are there any other questions? Okay, so if there are no other questions, we will be ending here. And thank you so much for attending. And we hope you'll join the next seminar from the Haskins Global Literacy Hub.